Standing before us on the podium is the nominee from Edo State, the former Minister of State Health, Dr. Osaghie Ehanire. On behalf of my colleagues, I want to welcome you to the Senate chamber. We are already in receipt of copies of your CV. You may highlight anything that you think needs to be noted by the Senate and anything that you might have not included in the CV but is of significance in this exercise. Once again, you are welcome. You can address the Senate.
Principal officers of the House, distinguished senators, may I recognize the distinguished senators from my state, Edo State, Senator Matthew Oluyide, Senator Clifford Odia, and Senator Francis Alimekega. And with your permission, Mr. President, may I also recognize the senators from my mother's state, Delta State. Thank you. Distinguished senators, it is my great pleasure and privilege to be here, standing before you. I stood here in 2015 for the same procedure that culminated in my being appointed as Minister of State for Health. I'm grateful and I do appreciate His Excellency the President of the Republic for the recognition and the opportunity given to me to be standing here again today. The CV that I have sent around is very detailed, but I will take the opportunity to share a few things with you that are of interest. Very briefly, first, I attended the Government College Ibadan. I believe a nominee who was here 2 days ago also extolled the values of that college that prided itself in discipline. That college will be 90 years old this year. I was there for the West African School Certificate and a higher school certificate. I opted to accept a foreign scholarship rather than enter the universities to which I was admitted here, and found myself in Germany at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, which is 547 years old this year. And I graduated from there and went on to do my internship and to be registered as a medical practitioner in the state of Bavaria. I got a license to continue with my postgraduate education, and I went on to spend a total of 9 years in the hospital systems in that country and came out with a diploma in anesthetics, a board certification at the Medical Board of North Rhine in general surgery, and a board certification in the subspecialty of orthopedic and trauma surgery. Distinguished senators, the value of this path of education is not just that I went in there and collected, got the knowledge and got the skills of surgery. It is in the comparative knowledge and experience of being immersed in the health system of another country, a typical developed country, and weighing it against the health system of my country here, which I also experience. The comparative value has been extremely instructive for me. When I left here, I was 19 years old. When I came back, I was 35 and I had a family. I started my career in Nigeria at the University of Benin Teaching Hospital, and from there I went on to take an employment with Shell Petroleum Development Company, Warri, where I was born, as a divisional surgeon in the West. From there, I also branched out into private practice. And in all of this, I also was able to see the health system of Nigeria from the private practitioner's point of view, from the point of view of a company doctor, and from the point of view of a doctor in a public hospital. These experiences have been very valuable. I entered into politics because of my interest in the vision and the passion of President Buhari. And I am honored and pleased to have been asked to join his cabinet. I believe I owe it a duty to also brief you on the stewardship of the last 3 years. One of the main pillars of the administration of President Buhari is investment in human capital development. And the linchpin of human capital development is investment in the healthcare. And critical in investment in the healthcare is investment in the primary healthcare sector. The primary healthcare is what has been the major activity of the Ministry of Health in the last 3.5 years. When this regime came, only 20% of the primary healthcare centers were functional. Today there are more than 50, and it is all due to the partnership with state governments, of which I will say that some states did better than others, and also development partners who all believe in the alma mater declaration that primary health care is the key to universal health coverage. A lot of achievements have been made in that sector, and I would also add that the immunization coverage has increased reasonably. The vaccine procurement plan for the next several years is secured. The polio eradication has gone on very well. We had a setback a couple of years ago, but we are on the road to being certified now. And the primary health care sector has been the main focus for a lot of other interventions, together with the National Center for Disease Control. I would like to appreciate the contribution of this august House in the release of 1% consolidated revenue fund to drive the primary healthcare sector for the basic healthcare provision fund, which is already long into realization. About 23 states have been engaged. Several have been given some of their tranches. Some have had their facilities inspected. There's been some training going on. The National Steering Committee and the Technical Working Group have all been constituted. I also want to appreciate this House for the law setting up the National Center for Disease Control, which has taken up its duties of providing health security for the country. They are the custodians of our public health, and they are doing a very good job. During this period also, the National Agency for Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, has done a lot of work in protecting us from fake drugs. You may have read in papers today that they destroyed about over 1 billion naira worth of tramadol, and also protecting our borders from importation of substandard and fake medicines. There has been relative industrial peace in the health sector, and the approval of minimum wage has also helped to cool things down. It is my prayer that the harmony in the health sector remains. The tertiary healthcare institutions are in a state of reformation. There was a plan being worked out to improve the reputation and improve and restore the confidence of Nigerians in this health sector, so that not so many people will go abroad for treatment, which cost this country an estimated 1 billion in capital flight. We would like to encourage governors and partners to scale up their intervention in the secondary healthcare sector, which is between the primary and the secondary and the tertiary healthcare, because secondary is supposed to take referrals from the primary sector, and it is this area particularly where the private sector we hope they can be introduced and included. Health financing is still a work in the making. The National Health Insurance Scheme has received a new executive secretary, and we are waiting for that progress on the bill that has already been submitted, or rather the law that has already been passed and submitted for the consent. We are also working on models to increase health funding by encouraging states to set up community health insurance schemes, so that the pool of money available for health care is increased. Research has been going on very well in our research institutions. We have discovered through one of our research institutions a drug that takes care of sickle cell anemia, which has been licensed to a company for production all during the last years. And also one commercial company has been given permit to look into production of vaccines, local vaccines. The challenges facing the health sector of particular great importance is a weakness in the area of referrals. A group has been set up, a technical group has been set up to look into working on creating a national emergency and ambulance system. You all know that in developed countries of the world, if you are not well or there's an accident, you call a number.
Doctor, I think you can round up this so that you can entertain questions.
Very good.
You can round up your presentation.
I will leave the message, the rest of it to questions, and I wait your further directive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Ibrahim.
My name is Ibrahim Yahaya Oloriegbe. I represent the people of Kwara Central and Kwara State. Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the opportunity. Mr. Nominee, a colleague, I congratulate you for being renominated by Mr. President. It's my assumption that Mr. President found you worthy and of good performance. That's why he's returning you. I also note with commendation your wealth of experience and your distance as a medical practitioner for about 46 years, long span, providing services to humanity. I'm not unaware that Mr. President may post you to or assign you to any other assignment of ministry. But my two questions will be based on your last sojourn in the last 2.5 years in the health sector and your long years of medical practice and knowledge. Now, the first question, you will agree with me that the performance of any health system of any country is measured through key performance indicators. For Nigeria, and for any country for that matter, the best way to be able to look at that is widely accepted for performance indicators is that is conducted by the country. And for us, it will be the National Demographic and Health Survey. The last one was in 2018. And I'm sure you may be familiar with some of these indicators. Okay, you are not hearing me. Sorry. I said the performance of any health system is measured through some performance indicators of the key elements of the health system. And I said the best and most accepted one are those measurements that are conducted nationally, not any report by any international organization. And I said for Nigeria, our source of measuring our performance in the health sector is the National Demographic and Health Survey, the last one of which was published in 2018. Some of these indicators include, sorry, my listening is on. So some of the indicators include, I'll ask my questions. I just laid the grants, Mr. President. That we have, there's no time, sorry. So my question is that if you look at these indicators, we are compare 2013 to 2018, we either stagnate or we are getting worse. 1 in 5 Nigerian children are never immunized. Immunization that you mentioned, we have only 31% full immunization, and we have only about 21% of appropriate immunization. We still have about 122 children dying before their age of 5. So my question is, what will you do differently in terms of the 6 building block of health system to be able to make Nigeria health system to perform better? That's number 1. Number 2, in your earlier presentation, you spoke about the tertiary health institutions and what you are doing in tertiary, primary, and secondary. And you are urging for a better linkage. The Nigeria health system can be looked at as an inverted comma, where you have majority of resources given to the base that is treating less. 80% of the problems in primary health care, but 80% of resources is in tertiary care. So what will you do? We cannot change that. So my question is, what will you do differently to make where we give the resources to serve where the problem is, because the body is in primary health care? Thank you, Mr. President.
The Senate sitting chair, my distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Sulaiman Umar, representing the decent people of Kwara North. Mr. Nominee, congratulations for your renomination, and thank you for your service to our country. And you've stated most of your achievements. However, I'm interested in one layer of healthcare delivery this afternoon, which is primary healthcare. As we are told by the WHO that almost 90% of the healthcare need of citizens can be provided by primary healthcare. And I agree. In Nigeria, we have almost 30,000 primary healthcare centers scattered all over this country. And only about 20% are functional. Others are not functional for reasons you are aware of: lack of infrastructure, human resource for health, drugs and consumables, name it. And poor funding generally, even though health is, on the concurrent legislative list. Now my question is, what is your next level vision and action plan to be able to turn this around, given that even what we are budgeting for health is very, very far away from what is expected, and that is not going to change soon. So you are going to continue to have less and less, but we have to find a way of doing more and more with less. So what creativity are you going to bring when Mr. President, assigns you to the health ministry? Thank you.
Olamilekan, representing Lagos West Senatorial District. Mr. President, I will start with this common slang that health is wealth. Today we have before us the ministerial nominee and a former Minister of Health of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. President, I will go straight to my question. Number one, on the administration of the National Health Insurance Scheme, what is your take as it currently were on that particular scheme? Do you think that the National Health Insurance Scheme that we currently have is properly run as that would be useful to every Nigerian? Two, how will you rate the tertiary health institution across this country, despite the concerted efforts by the government of the day to do everything humanly possible to make it functional at the optimal level? And lastly, on the issue of the primary health care. Okay, I will stop at that, Mr. President. Sorry.
Distinguished colleagues, just by way of...
Distinguished colleagues, I remain Bio Barakuma Degi Eremien. I represent the people of Bayelsa East, including the people of Oloibiri, where the first oil well, commercial oil well, was found. Yes. Mr. President, thank you for the privilege. Mr. Nominee, I looked through your CV and it is very impressive. In addition to the fact that you have served as Honorable Minister of State Health, I have also listened to your presentation and you touched on the focus of the President on primary healthcare delivery. Mr. Nominee, you are aware, as much as most of us do, that the menace of fake drugs in this country is alarming. I'm happy that in your presentation of stewardship, you talked about the destruction of 1 billion tramadol by NAFDAC. Mr. Nominee, from Karuan and Moda in Sokoto, the very last part, not in Sokoto, the northern end, to Brass, in Bayelsa State into the Atlantic Ocean. You have chemists, you have pharmacy, scattered all over the corners, everywhere you go in this country. And the truth remains, if you have to borrow the words of Mr. President, that if we don't kill corruption, corruption will kill us. That is applicable to fake drugs. If we don't kill fake drugs will kill the less privileged in the society. And of course, there are more in population. Based on your status as the immediate past Honorable Minister of State for Health, I will not be surprised if, Mr. President, if by the grace of God you are confirmed and Mr. President appoints you back into that sector. What strategic policy reforms would you introduce to strengthen NAFDAC to fight the menace of fake drugs? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, President. I would like to start with the last question of the distinguished senator from Bayelsa State. The question of fake drugs is truly, as you say, a horrible menace in the country, and it even made an appearance on the foreign news network some time ago. The check of fake drugs is a combined effort. NAFDAC is involved, but most of all of it will come from outside by false importation, declared as something else. So joint effort between NAFDAC, customs, and all others who work at the border, border police, and even immigration will have to be very responsible for overseeing this importation. But wherever the importation is found, they're all tested and then destroyed. The routine police and civil defense definitely also will be aware of production of fake drugs, or even if they're locally manufactured, or trafficking in these drugs, and they definitely have the powers to arrest and present such culprits to the police or to NAFDAC for proper steps. Senator Olamilekun, the NHIS is, as I said in my presentation, still a work in progress. A new executive secretary was just named, and also I understand this chamber here has sent a bill for assent. It's probably being studied now, which will introduce radically new dimensions to National Health Insurance Scheme, particularly the compulsory participation of employees in the health insurance scheme. It's an extremely important financing mechanism for the health sector, and I'm sure it will receive very, very close attention as it begins to unfold. The tertiary health care, as I also said, do require reforms. The first step in carrying out a repair is to admit that something is not right. And all of us know by common knowledge that the confidence in our tertiary institutions is not always very high everywhere, although they try their best. But there is a study going on that will give us insights into what is wrong and what the best way to correct the problems, which are mostly administrative problems. The government, the state also suffers losses, financial losses up to $1 billion by estimates, which of capital flight, which are not helpful to us at all. Senator Sadiq, the primary healthcare center is truly the bedrock and the foundation of healthcare everywhere. It is emphasized in the Astana and also the Alma Ata declarations and in the strategic development goals STG 3. It is true that building primary healthcare centers is a favorite let's say constituency project of honorable members and senators. In fact, I also use this opportunity to appeal that building such structures for primary health care should be in consultation with the Ministry of Health to tell you exactly where they are needed, and you also need a special design. It cannot be just any house, and then the location also has to be properly selected in order for it to be of best service. The policy of the government is to have at least one primary healthcare center in every political ward. That will be about 9,844, or roughly 10,000. If you have a large ward, you can have two. But they all have a particular design. And this design should best be maintained. Anyone who wants to build, whether from the private sector or as a philanthropist, should obtain a design from the government, from Ministry of Health, and also advice on the best location. Some primary healthcare centers are located in the bush or in where nobody resides, and nobody will be able to get there at night. The other thing that you can do is that you don't, if you have a constituency project, it doesn't have to be the building of a primary healthcare center. Out of the 30,000 that you mentioned, about 10,000 have been selected for the program of building one in every political ward. So we don't really need more building, we need renovation. And for those who still have an interest in participating, the primary healthcare centers need more than just a place for delivery.
Mr. Nominee, I have a long list of senators who want to ask you questions.
Yes.
So I would advise that you try to be very concise and precise.
Yes, but with your
so
permission,
that you can talk more.
this seems to be very important, but I do think that those who want to help in primary healthcare sector can help with provision of water, provision of solar power, with provision of staff quarters. So if you want to participate, you can look for a primary healthcare center and add staff quarters, solar power, and help to finance training of staff. That will help. It is true that there's been some stagnation in the demographic health survey indices, and the improvement in the primary healthcare sector, particularly also the improvement in transportation, patient transportation, will improve the indices. I do believe that that answers the questions to a reasonable extent.
Senator Matthew Rogide.
District, Edo State. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, thank you very much for this privilege to talk about the nominee that is before us. As a matter of fact, Dr. Osaghie Ehanire is from my constituency, Edo South Central District. And of course, was the immediate past Minister of State for Health. I was privileged to be in the Health Committee of the Senate, the 8th Senate, and we work very closely with him. Mr. President, first I want to thank the Senate for the tenacity that we have expressed, and of course the seriousness in the screening of our ministerial nominees. And of course, this one that we are doing this afternoon, having Dr. Ehanire before us, the questions that have been thrown at him, of course, will show to us what he has in the CV that he has submitted to us. Dr. Ehanire is one good product, and I will crave your indulgence that you allow me to flaunt it because he's my constituent. He has had the privilege of serving this government in the last 4 years. He's a very close ally and loyal person to Mr. President, our president of this country, President Muhammadu Buhari. They have been together for very many years. And of course, I think in the wisdom of Mr. President, he has seen all the attributes of Dr. Ehanire. And to renominate him, on behalf of my constituency, we want to thank Mr. President. Mr. Ehanire is in the APC, I'm in the PDP. But I think we are also assumed in our quest to have the right caliber of persons rendering services in the different aspects, of our lives in this country. We, the caucus, Edo caucus, we have all agreed that Dr. Ehanire is supported by all of us because he's in the best frame of mind to serve this country. You look at the resume. He left school when, of course, the standard of education was very high, 1963. He was a man who made all distinctions. He went ahead in 1965 to finish higher school certificates. You can see the good results that he posted. And then, of course, he went outside this country. Of course, as a specialist in surgery and trauma, Dr. Ehanire has proven his own method. He has done so very well. And now that he has been nominated by Mr. President, I think he's going to be in a better capacity. Maybe by this time, of course, he's going to be a full-fledged minister that, of course, will be able to render service to this country. So, Mr. President, my very distinguished colleagues, I want to crave your indulgence, and with almost humility, I want to ask that Dr. Ehanire takes a bow and go. In the face of what he has presented to this Senate, I'm most very grateful. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
And distinguished colleagues,
You are provoking fire.
I sincerely want to commend the minister nominee, but to also say that the ordinary Nigerian has for long been the victim of our systemic inefficiency and endemic corruption. And nowhere else has that found lamentable expression than in the inability of this ordinary Nigerian to access quality health care. As one that has practiced even outside the shores of this country, and you have seen what those nations do to cater for their citizens, particularly the ordinary ones, what will you be doing should Mr. President reassign you to the Ministry of Health to remedy this very lamentable position of the ordinary Nigerian and to rescue him from the collective elite conspiracy in this country. Thank you.
Including you.
Senator San
Cross River Central. Dr. Osaghie, having taken a look at the CV you have presented to us, I am left with no doubt that your credentials are impeccable, your experience is profound. I would therefore like to align myself with ranking distinguished Senator Matthew to say that you deserve to take a bow and go. But before you do so, very quickly, I'd just like to share two concerns. The first is an issue that has been touched by a colleague of mine, but for which I have not had any real response from you. The issue of insurance cover for our citizens. Health, like education, are so fundamental as far as good delivery, good service delivery and governance is concerned. Across the world, the high, the mighty, and the low have access to quality health. This is not the case in Nigeria. We need to re-engineer our health insurance policy and its implementation. What will you do differently? A lot of Nigerians are dying when they should not. What will you do differently? Secondly, a lot of Nigerians are dying out of malaria. He is taking, please, he is taking. The second issue, Mr. Nominee, is this. What will you do differently about malaria? We should be concerned with proactive measures about dealing with malaria, which is killing a lot of people. What will you do differently, please, as you take your bow and leave? Thank you very much.
Before I respond directly, I wanted to also say that the ratio of what was spent on tertiary health care and on primary health care actually is what prevailed before 2015. Since then, it has balanced out that the primary health care is receiving actually more funding, by far better funding now, in responding to the question of the distinguished senator on that side. But the insurance issue is very patent, and as I said before, before you can correct something, you must accept that there's something that is not right. And we do agree that the health insurance is not right. There is a bill which has, I believe, already passed through this Senate, which is going to bring changes in the health insurance architecture. I also mentioned that various states and communities are participating in community health insurance schemes to increase the pool of funding for reaching patients with healthcare delivery. As to what will be done differently, well, there is a lot to be done across the entire board. The tertiary health care, I already said something about that, and the secondary health care I also said something about. But as to the question of malaria, the malaria deaths are actually in decline statistically. So there is a result for all the investment that has gone into malaria elimination. There is no end to it because we are talking about malaria elimination. So we don't rest on our oars, and there's been significant improvement in the fatalities that come from malaria. I believe that's all, distinguished President.
Is it the wish Senate that the nominee takes a bow? Yes. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. You can take a bow.